In the year 849, in the remote town of Wantage in Oxfordshire, Alfred was born into a time of great turmoil. At that point, England was not yet a unified kingdom, but rather a fragmented land of Anglo-Saxon territories. The seas were haunted by Viking longships, their fire and swords bringing constant devastation to coastal towns. Amidst this chaos, Alfred, the youngest son of the royal house of Wessex, was born as a seemingly insignificant figure, overshadowed by his three powerful older brothers. From an early age, Alfred lacked the physicality of a warrior. He was frequently ill, with a frail body and pale skin that made many dismiss any hopes for the boy. Yet what Alfred lacked in strength, he compensated for with an extraordinary intellect and an astonishing memory. In an era when most people were illiterate, Alfred stood out early on as possessing a rare and remarkable mind. A pivotal turning point came when he was just 4 years old. His father, the king, decided to take Alfred across Europe to roam the heart of the Catholic Church. The journey by sea and across dangerous lands was perilous, yet the frail child arrived at St. Peter's Basilica, where the Pope himself anointed him with holy oil and granted him the title of consul, a symbolic role evoking the image of both a spiritual and secular leader in the Roman tradition. Though later mythologized as a coronation, this event demonstrated that Alfred was recognized as special from a young age. In the eyes of many, he was a child chosen by God. Upon returning home, Alfred was not trained as a warrior, but instead found himself immersed in books. His mother, an intelligent and educated woman, once challenged her sons. Whoever could memorize an old Anglo-Saxon poetry book would get to keep it. While his older brothers struggled with the written word, Alfred, who could not yet reduce his prodigious memory to internalize the entire content as it was read aloud by a tutor. He won the prize and from then on displayed an unmistakable inclination for scholarship and superior intellect. By the age of 12, he began teaching himself how to read, an uncommon feat among the nobility at the time. He didn't stop with his native tongue. Alfred also learned and mastered Latin, the language of scholars, theologians, and clergy. His passion for knowledge wasn't limited to personal acquisition. He believed in dissemination. Later, as king, Alfred would personally translate numerous philosophical and theological works into Old English, making ideas and moral teachings previously restricted to monks accessible to his people. Even more astonishing was his memory and personal interaction. He could recall the names and stories of thousands ranging from nobles to peasants and greet them by name, making his subjects feel seen and valued. For people living in a dark and uncertain age, Alfred's intellect served as a beacon, lighting a path forward for the entire kingdom. Though his early life was marked by illness and low expectations, Alfred soon proved he was not just a scholar, but a born warrior, a cunning strategist, and an irreplaceable leader in one of the darkest chapters of Anglo-Saxon England. His remarkable military feats eventually made even the Vikings, who terrorized all of Europe, pause in fear. In 871, at age 22, Alfred's moment to prove his true capabilities arrived when he and his brother, King Thelard, faced a major Viking invasion at the Battle of Ashdown on the foggy hills of Berkshire. While King Thelard delayed in prayer, Alfred did not wait. He swiftly rallied the troops and launched a fierce assault against the tightly ordered Norse ranks. Under his command, the Wessex forces broke through the dreaded Viking shield wall, a nearly impenetrable defense tactic. The ground was soaked in blood, but Alfred secured a decisive victory, saving Wessex from near collapse. Soon after his brother's death, Alfred ascended the throne at the age of 23. Amid national turmoil, the kingdom was under siege, morale was low, and enemies surrounded them. Yet, he did not falter. His greatest battle, and perhaps the defining conflict of the 9th century, took place in 878 at Edington. Following a surprise Viking assault, Alfred was forced to flee and hide in the marshes of Athelney in Somerset. He endured severe hardship there, living like a commoner. Legend tells of a time when he burned some cakes while in hiding, a small but powerful symbol of humility and resilience. From the swamps, he quietly reorganized his army, summoned loyalty from his faithful subjects, and reappeared in the spring with a powerful force. The Battle of Edington was not just a military engagement, but a trial of destiny. Alfred personally led his soldiers and defeated the Viking invaders. The Viking leader Guthrum was forced to surrender, undergo baptism, and sign the Treaty of Wedmore. Dividing England into two zones, Alfred retained control of the south, while the east became the Danelaw under Viking rule. This was not merely a military win, but a political and spiritual triumph, a king who conquered not only with swords, but with faith and intellect. Yet Alfred did not stop at warfare. With the vision of a reformer, he understood that England could not survive on military strength alone. After the war, he began rebuilding the nation from the ground up. He was the first in English history to establish a navy, assembling a fleet of 60 warships specifically designed to defeat Viking vessels at sea. This formed the basis for the later naval dominance of the British Empire. Next, he constructed a system of fortified towns called burhs, fortresses with walls, strategically placed throughout Wessex to form a network of defenses. These burhs served not only as military outposts, but also as centers of trade and culture, organized as prototype cities in early England. In terms of law, Alfred compiled a new legal code, the Doom Book, combining Christian doctrine with Anglo-Saxon legal tradition. What stood out in this code was its emphasis on humanity, moral justice, and the sacred role of the king as the protector of fairness. Under his reign, law was not merely a tool for punishment, but a means of moral guidance. Alfred's vision extended far beyond politics and warfare. He placed profound emphasis on education. Having taught himself to read later in life, he deeply understood the importance of knowledge for the long-term sustainability of a nation. He encouraged all free young men to become literate and mandated that the nobility engage in serious learning. Personally, he translated the works of Boethius, Augustine, and Saint Gregory from Latin into Old English, bringing lofty philosophical and religious ideas closer to the common people. Alfred was not merely a great king, he was the very architect of the idea of England, a nation where intellect, faith, and strategy coexisted. He did not merely defeat the Vikings, he triumphed over chaos, rebuilt a world from its ashes, and planted the seeds for an Anglo-Saxon cultural revival. Alfred was not just an unyielding warrior on the battlefield, he was also a hero in a far more personal and brutal war, a silent, persistent, and excruciating struggle with his own body. A struggle fiercer than any clash with the Vikings. It all began with cruel irony on the most important night of his life, his wedding night in 868, when Alfred had just married Eils with a noble lady from Mercia. Instead of enjoying marital bliss, Alfred suddenly collapsed from a violent abdominal pain, so severe that he could not stand, could not speak, could barely breathe, according to historical chronicles. It was not a fleeting pain, on the contrary, it marked the beginning of a lifetime of torment. From that day on, Alfred endured a long sequence of horrifying symptoms: intense abdominal cramps, digestive issues, intestinal ulcers, recurring infections, chronic fatigue, anemia, and sometimes high fevers that left him unable to hold meetings, read, or even sleep. In the 9th century, an era when medicine still clung to magic, prayer, and folklore, illness was believed to be divine punishment, a sign of demonic possession, or karmic retribution. Royal physicians, who were often both doctors and priests, applied treatments that would make us shudder today. First came bloodletting, a common practice at the time, based on the belief that illness stemmed from an excess of bodily humors, and blood was the element to be drained. Alfred was frequently subjected to vein incisions, letting his blood flow in the hope of reducing his pain. Next came herbal concoctions and medicinal wines, a mix of nettles, mandrake root, wine, and even mercury, a substance we now know is highly toxic. He also had powdered gemstones applied to his abdomen, as people believed these could absorb negative energy and heal illness. A more gruesome treatment involved leeches. They were placed on the skin to suck out bad blood, though this often led to worse infections. If the pain became unbearable, red-hot iron rods were pressed against his abdomen, under the belief that fire drives out demons and could expel disease. Despite undergoing these bizarre, agonizing, and even life-threatening treatments, Alfred never escaped his mysterious illness. What's astonishing and admirable is that despite living in near constant agony, he maintained his intellectual sharpness, ruled wisely, and led his people with unwavering courage. He never allowed his pain to override his royal duty. Based on ancient descriptions, many modern doctors now believe Alfred suffered from Crohn's disease, a chronic inflammatory bowel disorder caused by the immune system attacking the body's own tissues. Crohn's causes inflammation along the intestines, accompanied by severe abdominal pain, rapid weight loss, fatigue, and recurrent fevers. It is an incurable illness even with today's medicine, and in the 9th century, it was essentially a lifelong sentence of suffering. One supporting clue for this theory is Alfred's described appearance in later life: emaciated, sleep-deprived, and rapidly deteriorating. He often retreated to private chambers for extended periods, away from court. At times, he couldn't eat solid food and survived only on diluted broths. Yet the extraordinary truth is that Alfred never abandoned his responsibilities. Even in pain, he translated books, issued laws, organized national defenses, and governed with iron resolve. Later generations would call him the wisest king of England, but they might just as well call him the most resilient man of the 9th century. Alfred's life stands as proof of a timeless truth: the greatest victories aren't always on battlefields, they re within the human soul. He defeated the Vikings feared across all of Europe, but more impressively, he conquered the devastation of disease and cruel fate, and lived as a king, a scholar, a father to the English people. Looking back, we see clearly, if Alfred had only been a skilled general, he might have faded from memory like so many others. But because he was a man with a frail body and an indomitable will, he became legend. A man in unrelenting pain who chose to live for others, rather than collapse. Throughout his life, Alfred not only battled the Viking legions in open war, but also faced a tireless internal enemy, a chronic, devastating illness that haunted him for decades. What earned him admiration was not just victory, but how he upheld the role of a king while being tormented daily by gut-wrenching agony. Many historical accounts depict Alfred as a sorrowful figure, thin, hollow-eyed from insomnia and exhaustion, yet he never showed weakness before his court or his people. This was not just resilience, it was strategy. Alfred knew that if a king showed physical decline, the realm could descend into crisis, and so he concealed his suffering, remaining a symbol of strength not only for the Saxon warriors, but for an entire civilization on the edge of extinction. When the pain became unbearable, Alfred would retreat from the main palace to secluded countryside lodgings, where the air was quieter and court duties less pressing. But even in these so-called rest periods, Alfred was far from idle. It was during these moments of recovery that he wrote laws, translated texts, devised national defenses, and pondered the future of England. Unlike many kings who simply issued orders, Alfred personally copied books by hand, studied Latin works, and cross-referenced them with scripture to craft legal codes that harmonized Christian ethics with Anglo-Saxon tradition. His most famous code, the Doom Book, was not merely a tool of governance, but a moral manifesto rooted in humanism and social responsibility. No one knows how many nights, while his body writhed with severe intestinal pain, Alfred sat by candlelight, writing, consulting with clerics, or contemplating ancient texts in search of answers for his people's destiny. He once wrote, "Without suffering, I would not have understood the value of vigilance." That sentence became a symbol of his leadership not by physical force, but through intellectual depth forged in agony. It's hard to believe that such nationally foundational achievements emerged under such dire circumstances. The educational system for the nobility, where students were taught reading, writing, morals, and history, was designed by Alfred while he was bedridden. He famously said, "A kingdom without knowledge is a blind kingdom." The nation's defense network of fortified towns, burhs, was also Alfred's idea, conceived during his illness. Using maps, notes, and letters, he directed their construction remotely, transforming England into one of the most defensible kingdoms in Europe at that time. Most notably, the English Navy, later synonymous with global power, originated with Alfred's vision. When his generals called for more ships to drive back the Vikings, Alfred did more than agree. He personally designed a new class of vessels, larger, sturdier, equipped with a two-tier rowing system for greater maneuverability. These designs were completed while he lay convalescing, proof that even in physical collapse, his intellect remained clear and sharp. No one can truly comprehend the pain Alfred endured. In an age without modern painkillers, surgery, or accurate diagnosis, he lived with relentless suffering every day. Yet, extraordinarily, he never let it hinder his contributions. Alfred continued holding court, issuing judgments, training the army, organizing communal prayers, and even personally supervising the prince's education, all while his body could have failed at any moment. During some periods, Alfred could not walk and needed attendants to help him ascend the throne. But once court began, he would sit upright, speak clearly, and make decisions swiftly, almost as if he were the strongest person in the room. This inspired unwavering trust from his people and absolute loyalty from his court. Medieval European scholars wrote of him not only as Alfred the Great, but also as the ascetic king, a monarch who sacrificed personal comfort for the enduring good of his kingdom. True courage, they said, is not the absence of pain, but continuing despite it. With Alfred, it was in the darkness of his long, painful nights that the sparks of civilization were conceived and ignited. That is why, more than 1,000 years later, he is still remembered as the founding father of England. In October 899, as winter's cold fog began to sweep across England, Alfred's health, once admired by his people, the king who had spent his life fighting both external foes and internal afflictions, suddenly deteriorated. Though he had spent years learning to live with chronic, gnawing pain, this time it was no longer familiar. Chronicles describe his final symptoms vividly: a distended belly, high fever, violent diarrhea, delirium, and cramps so intense he moaned wordlessly. These signs suggest his intestines may have ruptured, leading to systemic infection, a fatal condition in the 9th century. Throughout his last 30 days, Alfred lived in a state of half-consciousness, unable to eat normally. He wasted away into skin and bone, yet even on his deathbed, he refused to relinquish his royal duty. According to Anglo-Saxon chroniclers, though near death, he still summoned scribes to bring books, official documents, and correspondence to his bedside. On some days, he could only issue whispered commands, but mentally he remained fully focused on his realm's fate. He continued meeting with envoys and even summoned representatives from Mercia and Kent to discuss posthumous alliances. Some historians believe that it was during these final moments that Alfred delivered essential guidance to his son Edward the Elder, instructions for maintaining peace, reinforcing the Burr system, and continuing educational reforms. One of his last acts was signing a brief decree granting amnesty to a group of peasants who had stolen food out of desperation. On his deathbed, with a trembling hand and labored breath, Alfred chose mercy over punishment, a testament to a compassionate spirit that stayed with him until his final moments. On the night of October 25, 899, the night before he died, witnesses recorded one of his most horrific episodes. Monks wrote that he developed a raging fever, his body turning dusky, and succumbed to delirium. He called out his deceased father's name, referenced the Battle of Ashdown, and repeatedly muttered, "We must hold this land." Attendants recalled that Alfred no longer recognized anyone, but when he heard his son Edward's voice, he shed tears, the last vestige of feeling in a shattered body. His wife and family were not permitted at his bedside, as tradition allowed only male attendants and a priest to care for a dying king. He passed away on the morning of October 26, 899, within a cold chamber in Winchester, attended by only a few loyal servants and a praying priest. His final words, according to legend, were whispered, "May God preserve England." Alfred did not die in battle nor in opulence. He died in silence, exhaustion, and excruciating pain. Yet that solemn passing most deeply reflects his character, a king uninterested in glory, who lived to serve and died quietly like a candle extinguished after burning bright. His death did not shock England into chaos, it moved the entire nation to tears. News of his passing spread across the Saxon territories, and people organized mass prayers. Many common folk walked hundreds of miles to pay homage at his resting place, a rare pilgrimage for a medieval monarch. Asa, the monk historian, wrote, "We have lost our greatest king, but the light he left burns on in every law, every book, and in the hearts of those who believe in justice." After his death, Edward the Elder ascended the throne and carried forward the mission of unifying England. But Alfred's influence did not end there. Subsequent monarchs from William the Conqueror to Henry VIII acknowledged him as the foundational architect of an English-style kingship where morality, scholarship, and strategy coexist. People never called him Saint Alfred, despite voices calling for his canonization. Instead, he became known simply as Alfred the Great, not for his military victories or wealth, but for living and dying with unwavering belief in a better future. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next investigation.